Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cupid's Coach podcast. I'm your host, Julie Ferman, inviting you to transform me to we through your ever evolving process of doing dating better. And you're going to have a big leg up today because I have this great guy I'm interviewing today. His name is Tim Molnar, and he lives in Boulder, and he is a dating coach. And he created a book that came out this year. It's called Date Smarter, a strategic guide for navigating modern romance. And he's a young guy, so he knows about modern things as opposed to grandma here. Actually, I'm not a grandma yet, but I hope to be soon. Welcome to the program, Tim.
Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for having me on today. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I'm really glad you're here because I'm really exploring Colorado now. I had come to Colorado in the summertime as a camper, and then later a camp counselor for years, and always have considered Colorado to be my home. But then, of course, Los Angeles was great, and Santa Fe was amazing, and so here I am building here, and you're part of my exploration. So great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you. Colorado's a great place. I've been here for 11 years myself, and I think home's ultimately a collection of where we have our community. And so I think, as you continue to find that too, it'll feel more and more like home. Yeah.
It's really true. Those of us who have lived a lot of places, isn't it amazing? We have friends everywhere. And when we first came here to Colorado, we had a quick party when it was Cinco de Mayo, right about the time your book was coming out. And sorry, I didn't invite you. I didn't know you then, but we were celebrating the pool table arriving that day. And the extra part of this lower level of our house, this office is amazing. And it's huge and it's wonderful. And I've got more space than I've ever had. But next to it is an epic man cave. Because we moved here so that my husband, who's turning 80 in 2 weeks, I can't believe it, really wants to be with the boys. And both of our boys are up here. One is a nut for golf, and the other one's been a nut for skateboarding. And now his dog is on Instagram as the Uber dog with 1 million followers. You can be the millionth and one. Yeah. So that's why we're here. We're really family oriented. So here's what I want to know about you. How did you get interested in becoming a dating coach? It's not the career path that most of us choose, but you did, I did. How did you do it?
I think it started with very self-interested motives where I was interested in figuring out how to find a life partner. And at the time I was teaching sociology at the university here in Boulder. I was reading all these academic journal articles, all of this social psychology, and I wanted to understand how we could apply that to things that we actually care about in our day to day. And for me at the time, it was dating. And it's like, gosh, I'm reading all this stuff, and like, are there tips in here that can help me do this in a way that improves the probability of me finding this life partner that I was after? And so that's really how it started. And then as I started implementing changes in my own life, taking this kind of applied behavioral science framework to my dating life, experimenting around, friends started to get interested and it manifested fairly organically. And then at some point, I was just spending more and more time reading relationship science, other journals from sociology, psychology, all in sort of the dating relationship realm. And then that became the book, and the rest is kind of history.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that book. I see it right behind you, and I'm really happy that you've done it. People will always ask me, Julie, how come you didn't do the book? And I'm like, well, I thought about it 1 million times, but had I done it 30 years ago, it would be way out of date. If I had done it 15 years ago, way out of date. If I had done the book even 3 years ago, it would be way out of date because that's how quickly everything is accelerating. So I'm glad your book is recent and you're a young person. So we're going to get understanding from you that we don't get from just your average dating coach. And I love that you were really dug in on sociology. And then you decided to apply what you'd been learning and what you were fascinated by to the dating space. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun for me. And so I think there are a lot of things that we do in academia that sort of sit and stay in this ivory tower. And I didn't want that to be the case with the work that I was doing. I
Mm.
wanted to do stuff that felt like it could measurably improve the quality of people's lives. And like I mentioned, initially that started with my own. And once I had more of a proof of concept, it was something that I felt very passionately about. And that's why I eventually rolled it up into the book.
I love it. All right, so we're going to talk about some of um, your concepts, the things that you have elaborated on in your book. But what I'm curious about is how did what you were learning and what you had learned spin into finding your partner? Like, what did you learn? How did you go about that that would have been different than 2 years earlier before you had learned some things?
So it started with kind of getting clear on what it was that I wanted. And at the time, I had come across this journal prompt about life engineering. How can we design the existence, the life that we really want to have? And so I responded to this prompt about what is my perfect day 5 years from now. So I sat down and I started writing, where do I wake up? Who do I wake up next to? What does my physical health look like? What is the quality of my relationships? What's my financial health look like? What am I doing professionally? And I went back and I reviewed this and I realized a lot of what I wanted from that perfect day 5 years from now were things that I already had manifested in my day to day. And then, of course, there were certain things that I hadn't. And at the time, one of the big ones was a really terrific life partner. And so, sort of extending this idea of reverse engineering, I was thinking, like, how do I get there? I said, well, certainly before that happens, before I have this life partner, I'm going to have a girlfriend or perhaps a few. Before that, I'm going to go on some dates. And before that, I'm going to need to meet some people. I'm going to need to either like connect with them online, connect with them in person. And so it really started this exploration of like, are there studies that tell us like how you move from point A to point B in the process? What the probability, the odds are that if you go up to someone and ask them out, for example, that they'll say yes to a date? And it turns out there actually is some pretty fun research. So there, for example, there's a group of French scientists who sent a bunch of undergrads out into the field and had them basically just like ask people out and then kind of like figure out like if men were asking women out, what percent were roughly saying yes. If women were asking men out, the context was strictly heterosexual, but it still gave a lot of very helpful information. And in my case, it was like, okay, so when men were asking women out, on average 1 in 5 were saying yes. So I could say like, okay, so to go from point A, no date, to point B, date, I might have to ask out probably 5 people on average to get a date. And that's not guaranteed, but on average. And so it allowed me to sort of come up with this framework where eventually I developed this concept I call a date number, where it's actions we can take that lie within our control, putting a number to those so that now when we go out and say, like, great, like my date number for this year might be asking out 25 people or going on 6 dates or attending 19 social events, whatever particular date number it might be for you. But you're setting a goal so that when you do go out and you shoot your shot, you go to an event, you go on a date, and it doesn't end in marriage or the outcome that necessarily you wanted to, it's no longer this point of failure or rejection. It's actually just crossing off one of these points, and you're like, great, okay. Only 18 more social events to go, only 17 more social events to go. And it gives you a sense of progress, which it's amazing, especially with the rates of burnout that are happening with dating today, how much that can affect our psyche and continue to keep us motivated in this process, which, let's face it, like can be a very daunting process. Like dating is one of the most vulnerable things we do in our lives. And it's only natural that there are all kinds of fears and insecurities that manifest in the process. So we need systems in place to be able to help us continue progressing along the way.
Beautiful, amazing. One of the things I want to look at, Tim, is the way you've broken it up in a way that often personal trainers will. You don't just run a marathon. You don't just start bench pressing hundreds of pounds. You have to start somewhere. but the tracking and the measurement is really important. I'm working with a gentleman client right now who very much wants relationship. The former one is still unwinding. He's not the kind of guy who likes to be alone. This happens a lot with men, especially older in life. They want companionship. And so they're not coming to me to go on a series of dates. They're not coming to me to just try on some hats. They want the person, and they want the person to be the first person they meet or the second person they meet. And even after we've done two or three introductions, I'll start to feel the frustration. They're like, but I want my person. I'm like, I get it. And in my next life, I'm going to have the magic wand so I can just invent her, like build a bow workshop. Oh, you want taller? No sweat. You want more money? You want younger? You want better skin? You want more of a waistline? No problem. Got that handle. Oh, she should play pickleball? Great. Got it. But in the real world, it's not that easy. And the other part that is not easy about it is that the type of person who hires a matchmaker is the type of person who has a lot of financial resources. The type of person who has a lot of financial resources typically gets things the way they want them, when they want it, and how they want it, like now. What you're telling us is dating is a process, and we need to go through the process and learn while we're going through the process. And how about while we're going on those 18 social engagement opportunities, we're not just going to meet our person, it's all about me. No. Can we bring smiles to 18 faces that night? Right? What can we do that being at that party, being at that hike is going to lift humanity? How can we be with these 20 people who show up on the hike that will cause them to have a better day, a better experience of dating, of meetup groups, whatever? It's not always about us. And if we can get out of ourselves and look at it as a contributive experience, knowing that we have a goal, I think that helps. And I have a feeling your book has a lot of tools about that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things I would say to the multitude of clients that you work with who fall into this camp of expecting um, more instant results, I think that one makes a lot of sense, especially people who come from means and are used to being able to trade money for the things that they want. At the same time, I think we even for those of us who maybe don't aren't as well like economically resourced, we also have this instant gratification culture where it's like we put in our food order on DoorDash and it shows up at our doorstep, 45 minutes later. Or like now, it almost feels like with like Amazon Prime, like you order something and it like comes yesterday and you're like, how did that happen? So we're just very used to this and we become trained, and it's tough when we start to get these more deeply entrenched neural networks and these expectations to be able to push back against that. But for those individuals, I think there are a lot of parallels to be drawn, like you said, going to the gym, learning a new language, picking up an instrument. And so, regardless of how much money you have, if you haven't been exercising and you're expecting to be able to go and run a sub 3:30 marathon, you're not going to be able to do that off the couch. And so we understand that there are things that we care about, getting our dream job, whatever these things are that just they take time, they take effort, they take putting ourselves out there, they take points of rejection, they take iteration and experimentation. And without these things and without this creative lens, it's very difficult to go from I speak no German to I can feel comfortable walking around Berlin and having a conversation. We have to be willing to strike out and laugh at ourselves. And in dating, that can be a hard, difficult thing to do, and we can take it very personally because it is such a personal piece of our lives. But it really isn't too different from any of these other areas that we care about, except for the fact that it has such a monumental impact on our overall well-being. Couples therapist Esther Perel likes to say the quality of our relationships defines the quality of our lives. And specifically with this one individual relationship, certainly so much of our well being and happiness can be related to the quality of that relationship.
Absolutely true. For those of you who are listening who have invested time, energy, probably financial resources in the process of learning about love and learning about relationships and communication, hats off to you. And the reason is because Tim knows this. The the people who need the coaching the most are the people who will never sign up for it. They don't think they need it. They think that all of the reasons for why they haven't yet found the relationship that they've been hoping for, it's external. It's because men are all narcissists, right? And women are all gold diggers or not taking care of themselves or whatever the thing is, they've made up a justification that isn't very powerful. It keeps them stuck. So if you are listening to this and you know that you are a grower, that you are the person that Tim and I work with, just pat yourself on the back because I've been noticing. I do statistics between Christmas and New Year's every year, and I look at certain things, and it changes over time what I analyze. But what I always look at is the people that year that I saw waltz into a relationship. How did that happen? And who were these people? Uh, I might have mentioned to you earlier that about half of the introductions I do from my desk are actually free as community service. I have to say 100 times over, I don't promise them, but if I can see an opportunity to make one happen, I will. I'll try. I can't go anywhere until I get the yes from the guy first, because you guys are visual. And if the visuals aren't there, I can't get you excited. Am I right about that? I mean, come on. If she's
I I think it can be very. I think certainly physical attraction does and always will play an important role in dating. And I think there's a lot to be learned from how we used to date, where we would sit next to someone at work for a long time. We would be on the ultimate frisbee team with someone, and we had all of these in real life points of contact that would allow for something that sociologists refer to as the mere exposure effect to take hold. And that's this idea that by merely being exposed, the more time we spend around someone, we have the opportunity to develop an affinity for them. And so we might be sitting down across the table with someone at a speed dating event, and we're like, "Great, we have 4 minutes. Is this my person?" But really, I think I want to challenge that notion and say, you know, so many great relationships used to form when we would allow them to develop more organically, when we would get to know someone 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And it's the same reason that a lot of college roommates who maybe seem like unlikely friends end up being such great friends. They spend a lot of time around each other. They are able to let their guard down. They're able to look past a lot of the cognitive biases and judgments that we bring into initial interactions. And by doing so, we really see and provide an opportunity for people to surprise us and be like, oh, they have a really witty sense of humor, and that didn't come out right away. They're incredibly generous, and wow, they spend so much time looking after their aging parents. And these types of things can really lead to quality relationships and not often many of the more superficial pieces that apps allow us to filter for.
absolutely beautiful. I love that you've studied all of this from a sociological and research scientist perspective because it's really important. One of the things that I know you can talk about is related to the dating apps. Most everybody listening has at least tried them. I'd say probably 70% of the people listening has at least tried them. A lot of them will call them exhausting, soul-sucking experiences or whatever. But as you have pointed out, they still have a hard time quitting them. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when we think about how these were designed. They're designed off of a lot of the same psychology as slot machines. And this idea of being delivered what we call intermittent rewards, where we don't understand when that slot machine is going to pay out. And that unpredictability is incredibly addictive. There's actually a psychologist back in the 1950s by the name of B.F. Skinner who ran this experiment with pigeons, where the pigeons would peck on a little lever and a pellet of food would drop, and then they'd peck again and it would drop. But a separate group of pigeons would have an intermittent reward schedule. So sometimes when they pecked, the pellet would come, and then other times they would peck and it wouldn't come, and then they'd peck a few more times, it would come again. So they weren't sure when that reward was going to come. Now, at some point, the researchers stopped delivering food to the pigeons, and what they found was those who were on the regular reward schedule very quickly learned and they stopped, and they're like, okay, great, that reward's not coming, no big deal. The ones who were on the intermittent reward schedule, though, would keep pecking and pecking and pecking until many times they passed out from exhaustion. And so, what we can take away from that is maybe you know someone who's had a gambling problem or have watched any number of the public service announcement ads, that are saying that. And it makes a lot of sense. These intermittent rewards are very, very addicting. And the way that this swipe culture trains us is sometimes when we swipe right, we have that dopamine hit, but we don't know when that's coming. And because it's so unpredictable, we become very addicted to them. And so we can get exhausted, just like the pigeons in the B.F. Skinner research study, but we keep pecking and we keep pecking and we keep pecking.
It occurs to me, you would know, if this is the case, that part of the addiction is related to the disappointment when you don't get the pellet, right? It's anxiety causing. And so to relieve that pain, to relieve that disappointment, we go back and peck again. And so it's two things. We want the dopamine when it really happens, but how much of that need for it is coming from a place of suffering where we've been sitting there and nothing's been happening, right? That's in there too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And what's interesting is there's sort of this interesting duality that's playing out because I think it's easy to look into a lot of the statistics and say, wow, Forbes found last May that 78% of people who date online have experienced some type of burnout, whether that's, physical, emotional, or mental, related to their app use. But at the same time, more than half of relationships today begin as a result of online dating. There's a sociologist out of Stanford by the name of Michael Rosenfeld who runs a How Couples Meet and Stay Together study. So there's very good data on this, and it's much higher for LGBTQ plus daters. And so these are incredible introduction tools. Clearly, they work and bring a lot of people together. And it's also very clear that they are a big source of burnout. And so I think the real question, Julie, really becomes how do we use these as introduction tools to use them in a healthy fashion, to institute safe guardrails to make sure that we're not falling into the Skinner pigeon example, and instead saying, great, okay, maybe for me, a healthy boundary feels like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. Every morning when I have my coffee, I'll log in, I'll check my apps. Do I have any new messages? If I do, great, I'll respond. And if I'm comfortable, I'm going to move after a couple days into meeting up here because what I'm on this for, hopefully, is not to seek out a digital pen pal. There are plenty of other platforms that are great for finding digital pen pals. But if you're looking to meet up and see if you might be compatible, there's a lot of research. Hinge, for example, publishes something that says typically folks are comfortable meeting up after about 3 days. Now that's not the same for everyone, but a lot of people are. And my general thought is there's a bigger risk. I think many people are like, oh, I'm a little nervous that I'm going to push things along too quickly and this is going to fade. But I think a bigger risk often that's under that we don't look at or don't weight as much is the risk of continuing to not meet up, burning ourselves out, and then putting in all of this effort, all of this time, all this anxiety, as you were talking about, that's associated with it, and never actually getting to the part where we meet up and see, might there be something here?
Yeah, amazing. Um, when I was talking earlier about the research that I do every year to see who's going off in relationship, I forgot to mention the best part of it, which is that the people I see going off into relationships are growers. They're people who listen to podcasts like this. They're people who read books like Date Smarter. They're people who care enough to do it well. And in the process of learning what it takes to do dating well, guess what? We're learning how to be better humans, how to contribute to people better, how to how to communicate difficult things. One of the other issues that we deal with all the time is the flaking and the ghosting and people just sort of disappearing and just sort of like, just leaving, just after the second date, they didn't have the courage to say, you know what, thank you so much for taking the time to get to know me. We did a hike together. You took me to dinner last week. It's amazing. I'm not feeling that we've got like a romance thing going on. I think we should probably be buddies or hiking friends or something. Could we kind of spin it into a friendship? Would that be okay with you? What's so hard about that? If I said that to you, maybe you had the hots for me, all right? And you were kind of hoping I would be your person. You were excited to kind of take it to the next level, maybe some kissy face or something. And I say to you, I just don't think the romance part is here, but I love who you are. Can we keep being buddies and I'll invite you to my parties, you'll invite me to yours, and I'll send you a Christmas card every year? I mean, it, would that be okay? Did I kind of say it in a halfway decent way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea of candor, there's a psychologist, Adam Grant, who has this piece about, candor stings briefly, but what is really difficult is sort of these unresolved hanging chads, these things that just kind of stand out there. And I'm like, oh, like, I don't know, like, is Julie going to call me back? Like, is she not? And so, sure, like, it's difficult to get that feedback of like, hey, like, I appreciate you meeting up. I didn't feel the romantic spark, but like, thanks so much for your time. Um, that is hard to hear, and it allows us to move on to close a chapter here, and we don't need to continue to cycle through this mental torment of wondering what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, What's interesting though is there were some researchers out of NYU who looked into the reasons that people ghost, and I think it's very easy to assume that these people are doing this from a point of, I really just don't care about the other person, or I'm pretty self centered, or whatever it might be. When in reality, when they did some qualitative analysis on it, and they said, what are the reasons this is happening? People have pro social motives in ghosting. They're trying to protect people's feelings most of the time, but it comes from a misguided place where not everyone, but the majority of people would prefer exactly like you were saying, Julie. They'd prefer that candor, they'd prefer knowing where they stand.
And if we can keep a little bit of levity, keep it kind of playful, it certainly is easier to take. The reason I was laughing earlier is because one of my coaching clients was telling me that she had been dating a guy named Chad and he became a hanging Chad because he was just like, wouldn't give her an answer. He was just a hanging Chad. Now, there are people who are young enough that they don't know what that's all about, but it had to do with Florida and politics, and it was just funny. Okay, we're back. Tim, you are so much fun to talk with. I have another question for you, which is we talk about and we complain about that we don't meet more people out there in the world. Um, Personally, I see that getting a little better, but maybe that's because I run a boot camp and I literally train people to do it. In week 3 of boot camp, and you'll see it now that I'm in the Denver area, you will see the Denver area becoming a lighter, more friendly, warm, transparent place to live because I send all these people out on experiments. And the experiments are as simple as when you're in the grocery store, it's not about you. If you're sitting there having a cup of coffee by yourself at a Starbucks, it's not about you and what do people think about you that you're sitting there by yourself. I don't know if guys ever worry about that, but girls do. They think, oh, if I'm sitting at a bar by myself, they're going to think I'm a whore. They tell me these things. Well, I'm not a whore, and I do sit by myself at bars and restaurants and coffee shops and have all my life. So the mission is how many smiles can you bring to how many faces? And when you go to a singles event and you're feeling a little like, oh, I don't think there's anybody here for me. Oh, why did I waste my evening? Why did I go do all that? Why did I get my nails done? Instead of that, which is just crazy making, you're looking for the people who could really benefit from somebody saying hi, right? Look for the wallflower. Look for the people who just, they have nobody to talk to. You just walk over and say hi. Hey, Tim, nice to meet you. I'm Julie. Good to know you. And you spread a little sunshine. And then you go to the next person. And by the time you've done that with 15, 20 people, you're not feeling self-conscious and you're not feeling bored anymore, are you?
No, absolutely not. I think there is this pluralistic ignorance that's going on. That's exactly what you're saying, where we're all sitting in this Starbucks. Many of us are sitting in the Starbucks by ourselves on our laptop, reading a book with our headphones in, actually hoping that someone's going to come over and initiate this conversation. Same thing at the party. And when that actually happens, there not only are we happier as a result of having said hi, those people are happier. And then what's interesting, and there's fun research to back this up, is that people who view that interaction as well, are privy to it, they actually report an uptick in overall well-being. So it's really this three-pronged joy that you're putting out into the world, just like you were saying, Julie. And I think often it's, we worry like, oh, I don't know, this person seems like they're really into what they're doing. And it's not to say that there's never someone who's sitting on a subway or in a Starbucks and they have a tight deadline for work and aren't able to have a conversation. But certainly, like in the example you were giving, you're out at a social event, people are opting to go out because they want to socialize, because they want to cultivate sense of connection and belonging. And so by going up to them, if they're not having a conversation, like they're feeling the same way, like, gosh, like I came here to meet new people and this feels socially difficult. And I really appreciate that Julie came up and gave me a smile and said hi.
It takes practice. I teach women especially to use something that I call a calling card, and this is not a calling card, it's my business card, but um, I'll show you an example of one if I've got it handy. I don't think I have it handy, but basically, it's just got a smiling shot and it's got a first name on it. It's got a phone number that can't be Googled, a Google Voice number or a burner app kind of a number. Women are hesitant because they don't know if this is a good guy or a bad guy yet, in the future world, I think we're just going to be able to like look at the person. We'll get the drop down menu in our Google glasses or something. It'll say, well, he's single, he's never been married, he wants to have children, and he's a good Christian boy, or whatever, it'll say something like that. But until we have that, I like for people to engage out there in the world and then say, nice to bump into you today. Here's how to find me. And you know what? My friends and I plan some really great events. If you happen to be single, we'll invite you. That's how you
Hmm.
find out if they're single. And you start building a list of people who are single who would love to come to these events. And they're not lying because they have a friend named Julie Ferman who plans these events all the time. As a matter of fact, how about if you and I plan some events together here right in Colorado? Do you have a local community of people or are they all over the place?
So I work with clients all over the country, all over North America, even a little bit abroad. In terms of things that I do locally, though, I do. I run something called the Connection Lab. And Connection Lab is an opportunity for people to come together and meet strangers and have deeper facilitated conversations where it's not specifically marketed as a dating event. My hope really is that people come together and are able to leave feeling more connected, to be able to normalize this idea that we can have conversations that supersede the superficial. And so, how I often do that is we'll kind of group people into either small groups, maybe three or four. Sometimes it's a partner activity, and they'll have about 12 minutes to discuss something that's just a little bit deeper than we often would get into with a stranger. How are you different today than you were 5 years ago? And how are you the same? What did you think you'd be doing with your life when you were back in high school? Little things like this where and the vulnerability of the questions kind of escalates
Mhm.
as the evening goes on. But I really love the evening because, like I said, the bar really is feel more connected. But also, and I've thought a lot about this, and so I love that idea of the calling card. It's how do we get these connections? Let's say that you and I meet at one of these events and we're having this really great interaction. We want to take this to the next step, but maybe I'm a little nervous, maybe you're a little nervous to say like, hey, we should swap numbers. And so what I try and do, and I try and do this in a way that doesn't feel super forced, is to provide what I call like an internal and an external connection card over the course of the evening. So, an internal connection card is something that you want to take away from the evening. So, maybe I give like a little quick TED talk at the beginning, and maybe the idea is, gosh, like I really want to feel more connected to a high school buddy of mine. And maybe we catch up once a year, maybe it's been 3 or 4 years. And so, my internal connection card is to put on my calendar what I call an implementation intention. So, it's that kind of like this behavior, time, place. So, Friday at 11 a.m. at my kitchen table, I'm going to send a text over to Brett and see if he's up for a call sometime in the next week and a half. And by having that specificity, we really drastically increase the odds of the follow through happening. And that's sort of this internal piece. The external piece is a card. So people have a pen and a different colored card for the external connection. Where if we meet and I'm like, Julie, like you just moved out to Colorado and you play pickleball and you're looking for a pickleball community, that's amazing. I'm like, my friends actually run this pickleball studio like just down the street. Here's their information. I'm gonna get them in touch with you. And so again, it's destigmatizing this idea that it's like it's a weird, uncomfortable. It's like we pause for a moment and we say, hey, write one of those external cards. Now you have an invitation where if you'd like to do this at some point over the course of the evening, just drop that card off to somebody. And it's amazing what doing this does for increasing those connections. But even such, it can be hard and scary for people. And so the next day, I'll send out an email and say, was there anyone you connected with who you would actually love to connect with, but you missed a chance to give them your external connection card? Or maybe you'd already given it out to somebody else, or you lost it. And if they say, oh, yeah, I'd love to meet up. I met Anne last night. She was great. Then I'll just send over a quick message to Anne. I'll say, hey, Anne, I got something from Thayer and he wanted to know if you'd be up for exchanging email addresses. And then if she's okay with it, then I'll facilitate that there.
I love it. One of the ladies in my boot camp classes, in week 3, we do the art of social magnetism. And that's where I send them all out on these flirting expeditions. I get them all these little calling cards. If they want to do that, I encourage it. And one of my students said, well, Julie, when I'm out and about, I just have my phone with me. And if I meet Tim, I'll just open up a text in my phone and I'll say, go ahead and put your phone number in here. And I thought that sounded like a great idea, except for do we really want to put somebody in our phone yet if we don't, I need the card as a separate thing. The problem with the card is it can get lost. It can get in the bottom of somebody's purse, and 6 months later, she uses that purse again, and she's like, "Who is Tim? What was the deal there?" And so all of these things can work, whatever you're comfortable with. But what you're telling people to do is right in sync with week 3 of my boot camp. I think what I want to do is have a special interview with you specifically about this stuff and make it a regular part of my boot camp because you're brilliant at this stuff. And I'm so glad you're doing it. But one of the things I keep track of when I'm meeting people out there in the world and they're in a relationship, well, great. How did you meet? And I haven't asked you yet. That's going to be my next question. Don't let me forget. But I'll say, how did you meet? How did you meet? And a lot of times I'll hear, oh, yeah, well, we knew each other from college, or no, we met at work. I want to know more. How did it actually happen? And what I'm learning is that about 65 to 70% of the time, it's us girls making it happen. You're at the Starbucks and you got your stupid ear things in and you're on your laptop. Well, so is this cute guy over there. But every now and then there's a little eye contact. And then she remembers how important it is to smile so that he knows that she knows that he exists. And she knows that he brought a smile to her face. That's huge for a guy. He knows that she's going to be nice. He knows that she's going to be approachable. And one of my boot camp clients told me exactly how she did this. It was just that scenario at a coffee shop in Santa Fe. And they're sort of having this, every now and then they catch each other's eye. And she had a chair at her table and she just pointed him and she said, like, come on over here and sit down. Well, he did. And they're having a relationship today.
Oh my gosh.
It's not
I
that
love that story.
close.
And I'm a sucker for that story too, because I met my partner Paige at a coffee shop slash brewery, kind of coffee shop during the day. And I had seen her and I wanted to say hi. And I went up and I think my laptop was almost fully charged, but that didn't matter. I was like, hey, do you mind if I plug in my laptop here?
You
Um,
didn't need a charge. And then she looks and says, you got 99% already, dude.
I know. I feel uncomfortable if it's below 100. So thank you for humoring me here. But it is just those little moments and like how do you manifest those little moments? And there are a lot of things like whether we are comfortable initiating or not that we can do to make ourselves more approachable. And so if you work from home, are you able to work out of a coffee shop? If you are, like, are you sitting at the isolated table in the corner? Or if there's a community table, can you sit down there? And then every time someone sits down, chances are they're going to say, hey, is it okay if I sit down here?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden there's an opportunity to say, like, yeah, of course, like, how's your day going? And so like these natural touch points feel less manufactured and they can happen more easily when we don't have the noise canceling headphones on, when we have some type of object with us that's a conversation starter. You know, it's like a T-Rex on your t-shirt playing guitar, or a sticker on your water bottle or your laptop, or a certain book that showcases a piece of your personality. And these are like the mini billboards that we carry around that allow people an easier avenue where if we don't want to be the ones, or we're not comfortable, or we don't think it's appropriate in like how we view the social dance of dating to go out and make that first move, we can make ourselves a lot more approachable, like you said, Julie, with that smile, and let people know like this is going to be a friendly interaction.
Something else that happened this week that was troublesome. I orchestrated a date. He had to drive about an hour and 45 minutes to get to where she was. I thought it was very gracious of him to make that offer. And they had a lovely date. It went well. And then they're sort of in the, yeah, I'd be happy to see this person again, but there are these obstacles, there's the distance. And, she takes a lot of time to spend with her grandchildren, and he would love it if she just folded right into his life, right? It's like, come on, dude, she doesn't even know you yet. You can't expect her to do that. But he was telling me on the phone yesterday that he was surprised that she didn't text him or call him to say thank you. And I said, in her defense, I said, there are some really bad dating coaches out there who tell women in Cosmopolitan magazine, if they're still doing what they did, um, they will tell women, no, no, play the game. Don't ever reach out. Don't ever say thank you. Don't ever. And I know a lot of men who, if they don't get a genuine, sincere thank you from a woman that they have made an effort to meet for a first date, he's not calling her again. So I think she blew it.
Yeah, I think there can be this spiral that goes back and forth where for me generally like I don't encourage people to play games. I think that what people are referring to when they're like, oh, like treat them mean to keep them keen, or whatever it is.
I never heard
Um,
that one before.
I have to credit a British friend, one of my British friends. So it might be like a UKism. I'm not sure, but I thought it was kind of funny. So I'm stealing that here. But this idea that like by seeming less eager they will feel more interested, and like certainly if you're calling them 13 times and leaving a bunch of voicemails right after a date, like yeah, that's going to be too much. But I don't think that's what people are referring to typically here. And so when it's that idea of like, oh, like how soon should I follow up, and like do I be genuine or do I need to like play this dance, like sure, there is a little bit of dance that goes back and forth here, and you have to feel out like how that response is being matched and mirrored by the other person, what they're comfortable with. But oftentimes when we get into these ideas of like, great, like if they just don't hear from me, then then they'll start to get a little anxious and they'll become more, it's like we often confuse this idea of like spark and chemistry with anxiety, which is not great in a long-term relationship. And we can get these sort of like avoidant anxious dynamics that play out where
Like
when
B.F. Skinner and the stupid pigeon, right?
yeah,
It's
exactly.
crazy making. And I watched that happen. I've got another situation right now where there was a first date. They were maybe about an hour from each other. It took some negotiating to figure out how to get together. And then they had a great time and they had a second date. And he's busy, she's busy, but she's feeling that anxiousness right now because she will feel more comfortable if he reaches out to her. So I said to her yesterday, I said, well, what's more uncomfortable? You being the one to tickle him and say, hey, Tim, are we going to see each other again? How's your schedule? What should we do? Or are you going to sit with the anxiety of not knowing if he's truly interested? I mean, pick your poison.
Absolutely. And then if he isn't interested, at least she knows and she can move on.
That's it. So fortunately, I'm in the middle. So I had a chance to reach out to him this morning and say, "Hey, checking in. Did you guys get together?" Of course, I know that they got together, and I know that they got together a second time, but I always want to know the same questions. I don't always get the chance with my free introductions to get the feedback, but in this case, I want to. And so I always want to know, what was the date like for you, Tim? What were your impressions of her? What are the qualities that you appreciated in her? Were there some things that you didn't appreciate? Did you find her to be warm, engaging, good company, attractive in a separate line? And if you had the chance, would you be open to seeing her again? And very often, I can get that second or third date to happen because I find out the answers to those questions. It's really hard to ask. Hey, Tim, we just had a first date. So I'm just really curious, what qualities in me do you really appreciate? And which qualities are you kind of annoyed by? Like,
It's a hard question on date one. Yeah.
because, human beings, we can be annoying. And some of us are annoyed by some things and not others. So we're so complex. Isn't it incredible? I was listening to somebody talking about advanced thinking, like, who we might be generations and generations and generations down the road. And it was a science type in Los Alamos. And he said basically, well, we won't be needing conversation. That just takes too much time and there are too many misunderstandings. So we'll be able to somehow telepathically communicate with each other. Although I don't know that I want you to know everything that's on my mind. All right, one more fun thing. Okay, about your relationship. Yes, you met at this coffee shop place. Who was it who kind of made it happen, that initial getting together? And then afterwards, who was kind of the pursuer? Was she checking in with you? Was it even? Were you pursuing her? How did that go?
It's funny, we debate this looking back, and every year on our anniversary, we go back to where we had our first mutually agreed upon first date, and we had it here at the reservoir in Boulder. We brought a little picnic and ended up staying out until like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was great. And so on that day, we head back to the reservoir if we're in town and do that same date. And I think 4 or 5 years in, we were discussing how things started, and we ended up scrolling all the way back to the very beginning of our texts. And we were both wildly wrong. It was amazing. Our perceptions of how things started, where I was like, no, 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 no. Like, I was, saying all these things. She's like, oh yeah, you were. And so it was a little bit of a volleyball match. At the beginning, for sure, I was interested. And the very first time we met, she was actually in a relationship. And so it was some time before we had gotten back together. And I reached back out and was hoping that maybe she had been single at this point and saw someone who looked vaguely like her. And I think I had just texted something like, hey, was that you I saw out on the bike ride? Or was that your doppelganger? She's like, no, no, it wasn't me, but good to know there's someone who looks just like me in here. And then that sort of like reopened the conversation. And I just sort of like, put the ball into her court, and she was like, hey, like, how are things going? And I'm like, okay, follow-up question. Like, I think maybe there's some interest in at least like a little bit of a conversation. And so yeah, and then we had both sort of like dated other people in between, and so there was this whole kind of messy dance. And at different times, each of us were single or not. And then when it finally happened, it was great, but it wasn't like a clean, easy, like, I pursued her and like this is what happened. It was like I made the first move for sure at the coffee shop, and I knew very early on that I was quite interested, and I think she was like, yeah, he seems nice, but um yeah,
I mean,
took a little time.
do you have kids together?
No, we don't. We'd like to at some point. We're
You're young
still,
enough, you got time.
yeah, yeah.
My husband was 44 when he first got married to me. And so he was late in the game, but we got pregnant quickly. And so our two boys are now 31 and 34. But Gil's 80, right? Turning 80. It's a lot. That's a lot of years. But the funny thing is, he's just like a kid. I really encourage people not to be too hung up on the age thing. I stopped revealing it on profiles a few years back, and it's been miraculous what I've been able to create by just not letting people come up with an idea in their mind for who this person is at 42 or 62 or 82, right? And because it's really more about vitality and it's more about shared lifestyle and values and do we have fun together? And people who take good care of themselves can live quite a long life, very often we do. So it's just really fun. But I have nicknamed this house the home of arrested development. And we'll have you over at some point on a day when you and your wife want to come over and play pool and play ping pong. And there's a whole putting green out here. I mean, it's nuts. But this is because Mr. Ferman refuses to grow up.
No, but I love that piece too about the you know, age just being a number. Like, sure, that can feel a little bit cliche, but I think in the dating world, it's anything but. And um, my partner Paige and I were talking some months into our relationship, and we're like, gosh, like we were both on apps at the same time. Like, I wonder like when we would have come across each other's profiles. And we were sort of like joking about it. And, we had just lived a mile apart. And so there weren't any type of like geographic barriers that would have kept us apart. And we realized that I was 2 years outside of her age filter. And so, like, if we hadn't met in person, like, our lives would likely both be very different right now.
It's crazy. We do a lot of collaborating among matchmakers. And last night I was back and forth with one of my dear friends who's a matchmaker here in Colorado, and she's searching for a particular woman. And so I sent her possibilities within about 2 years older and 2 years younger than the firm parameters. And she wrote me back and said, sorry, her age parameters are firm. And I'm like, no wonder she's single and had to spend $40,000 to hire a matchmaker. I mean, if she just opened up her mind, she wouldn't have to spend all that money, right? She's spending all that money and she's going to still miss a lot of really good candidates. There were three candidates that I had who were either too young or too old. Uh, can we get rid of the checklist? Really? So I like the idea of your events, Connection Lab. Let's do one together.
Yeah, I would love that.
It'd be really fun. Do you do it with age parameters or you try to do equal men and women? Is it all single people or everybody?
So I do age parameters, and I don't focus a ton on gender split. I'm starting to increasingly a little bit more, but because these are intentionally not advertised as dating events, and I'm very cautious about keeping them that way
Mhm.
because I don't want people to show up and feel like they're in a job interview, being like, okay, like, am I going to get the job of girlfriend here? I want it to feel like, oh, wow, I had this like great conversation with someone, and like, then maybe they leave and they're like, huh, like, was there maybe something more there? And then to have that so that you don't have that anxiety that can sort of derail us and bring out some of those judgments and bring out some of those personality traits that really aren't indicative of like how it's going to be to connect and interact with this person.
I love it. And if it's not called a dating event, then when people leave and they've had a bunch of wonderful conversations, they've had their experience, but they don't have a new prospect for husband or wife. Well, we didn't promise that. What we promised was engagement and communication and the opportunity to develop relationships of all kinds, which fuel your ability to do dating well and find your partner. It's all part of the process. So I love what you're doing. I think we should do one together. Will you be sure to let me know when you're planning one and I'll jump in on it and I'll invite my people and you invite your people. It'd be like risky business. It'll be really fun.
Absolutely. I love that, Julie.
Thank you for your time today, Tim. I'm your new biggest fan. I'm so glad you're in my state.
Mm, thank you. I've had a blast chatting with you here.
Absolutely. I know I'll get to meet you soon in person. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're paying attention. I think I'm going to make this podcast recording part of my ongoing curriculum for the boot camp because what Tim's doing is spot on with what I want you all to be doing. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Go out there and transform me to we folks. All right. For yourself. See you soon.